father gave me just the right name because I've had to live through a lot of bitterness in my life, but I've always known I was loved. You see, Miriam means beloved, but it also means strong and bitter. And so Papa Heli, he named me just the right name. He also was a very God-fearing man. He took me and my family to the temple every single year to worship God. And he talked to us all the time about the promises that God had made to our people, his chosen people. And I knew from a very young age that one Israelite woman was going to be chosen to be the mother of the Messiah. But nobody could have guessed who it would be. I remember it like it was yesterday. Mama and I in the kitchen, the smell of baking bread. Mama was teasing me. Why all of a sudden so interested in becoming a good cook? And then we started talking about my betrothed, Joseph. Now, I knew who he was because I had seen him from across the synagogue. But I didn't really know that he was the most handsome man in the world until at our ceremony when he was looking down into my eyes. I thought it was so kind and loving that he was telling me that he promised to take care of me all the days of my life. Then I knew it wasn't going to be hard to fall in love with him. Papa Heli was very impressed with Joseph. You see, not only was he a God-fearing man like Papa, but he was also a descendant of David like Papa. Only Joseph was also a descendant of King Solomon, so he had a very fine pedigree. Mama and I were giggling about him and thinking about him, and I turned around and right there in our kitchen, there was this huge man. And you gotta know, men don't come in women's kitchens unless they're married to them. He was no ordinary man, though. He was huge, and he was shiny, and he was terrifying. It didn't help when he said, "Greetings, favored woman. The Lord is with you." Now I was confused and terrified. I couldn't even stammer out a question. What, huh? He said, he realized he was freaking me out. So he finally said, "Don't be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God." I just stared at him. What does that mean? And he said, "You will give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus, and he will be very great, and he will inherit the throne of his ancestor David, and he shall reign over the house of Israel forever, and his kingdom will never end." I was like, wait, what? What did he just say? Wait, was he talking about I'm being chosen to be the mother of the Messiah? I was like, wait, okay, I'll think about this. God promised Abraham that he would have a son, and then many, many years later, he would have Isaac. So I was like, okay, I got to ask him, how's this going to happen as, I'm a virgin, I'm not married. And he was willing to clarify for me. He said, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the baby to be born will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God. What's more, your relative, Elizabeth, has become pregnant in her old age. People used to say she was barren, but she has conceived a son and is now in her 6th month. For nothing is impossible with God." Wow. I was in such a daze. But I knew I wanted this, and I was willing to trust God. So I reaffirmed, I am God's servant, and I am willing to believe what you say. I will trust you. I looked up, and now he was gone. I was just in a daze. I was so amazed, so humbled, so blessed, and so terrified. just couldn't believe that the Holy Spirit was overshadowing me right then, just like he did over creation on the earth. And it was just too much to take in. And that was such a peaceful, pleasant moment until my mother spoke up and said, well, this is going to be very interesting to have to explain to your father. She was right. Honestly, I'd forgotten she was there. But even though this was probably what my father wanted most in all of his life, this was not going to be easy to believe. Mama and I decided it would be a good time for us to go visit our cousin Elizabeth. Well, when Papa got home and we explained it to him, he started weeping and moaning and sobbing. And I didn't know what was he thinking. But finally, when he calmed down, he was able to say, Mary, don't you know what could happen to you if people don't believe you? Your very life is in danger. We got to make sure you're never alone until this baby is born, because we want to make sure everybody can know no one has violated you. But you know, the greatest danger we're in comes from Joseph. If he doesn't believe us, he could have you stoned. Maybe he agreed. Let's go ahead and go visit Elizabeth. Let's. Are you sure he meant now and not after your marriage? Mama was, yeah, and I said, yeah, Papa. The angel said that this baby was to be holy, and he was born by the will of God alone. So Papa said, we better go visit Elizabeth. I mean, we hadn't heard from her in over 5 months, so Papa said, maybe this is why. Let's go find out. But we're not going to talk to Joseph until we know, until we see this sign that you were given. And so we were packed up right away. We went to go see Elizabeth. And as we were going, I didn't feel any different. I couldn't, nothing seemed different. It all seemed the same, but I would have thought maybe I imagined it. And when I looked over at my mama, I saw the fear in her eyes. I knew this really did happen. And when we got to Elizabeth's house, I went straight to Elizabeth and I said, Shalom! And as she turned to me, her whole belly jumped. Wow, is she pregnant? And she came to me and she said, you are blessed above all women, and your child is blessed. And I didn't do a double take. I'm not showing. How could you possibly know that I'm expecting? Oh, God must have told her. She also said, why am I so blessed that the mother of my Lord would visit me? I know, and my baby inside me jumped for joy when I heard your greeting. And you're blessed because you believed God. Wow, it was pretty amazing. Well, we stayed with Elizabeth and her husband Zachariah for the whole 3 months until the baby was born, and it was a boy. And we knew that this really was from the Lord. Boy, during that time, though, I prayed a lot. The Lord was building my faith. But I knew that he really was going to take care of me. But I still prayed a lot. Well, when Papa was finally convinced and my morning sickness was calmed down, we decided it was really time for us to go and tell Joseph. So we got home. Papa Heli, he went and talked to Joseph alone. Well, we were all waiting nervously to find out what was going to happen. You know, he didn't react right away, and we took that as a good sign. Maybe he was praying about it, like we were all praying for him because he held my life in his hands. Well, while we were waiting for Joseph to make a decision on what he was going to do, I was feeling that baby growing inside of me. And the day came when I could feel him fluttering inside of me. It was so exciting and so terrifying. I wanted to share my joy with my parents, but with everything being so unsettled, I just decided to keep it to myself. But the day finally came when Joseph came for me. It wasn't with the mob to stone me. neither was it with the ceremony and the feasting that accompanies a normal wedding either. But it was a quiet family affair. It was okay. We were just so thankful that God had protected us. And Joseph, he was a good man, and he was gentle, and he was kind, but it wasn't very long until I realized, oh, we're married in name only. And that was kind of a little disappointing. So I kind of got the nerve up to ask him, and he said he was for our baby. He didn't want anybody to accuse him of being the father when really God was the father of this baby. I can't tell you the joy and the relief that passed through my heart when he called Jesus our baby. He was taking responsibility. He was going to protect us. He was going to care for us and love baby Jesus. And, I realized that he was God's man, just like I was God's servant girl. And God had chosen us both, and we were a team. Well, I kept getting bigger, and on the morning when I had to go to the well, I came across a lot of ladies who didn't believe anything I said. They liked to look down their noses at me, but even though I felt that condescension and that snobbery, I also felt God very close to me at that time. I talked to him all the time, and he was giving me the strength to put one foot in front of the other. And my whole life was better because I knew that God loved me and he had chosen me. It didn't matter who believed and who didn't believe. God was the one that mattered. Well, I was really going to need that strength for what was to come next. You see, Rome was in charge, and they really enjoyed throwing their weight around, right? So the Emperor Caesar Augustus decided he wanted to count all the subjects in his realm. Every man had to register, say how many people were in his family, and surprise, pay a tax. Well, that gave us a little bit of a dilemma because no self-respecting, able-bodied Israelite was going to be counted away from their ancestral home. God himself had given each tribe of Israel special land that belonged just to them. And we were very proud of our heritage. But you see, we lived in Nazareth, and we were from the house of David, which was in Bethlehem, so we needed to travel 90 miles to get there. Well, normally it takes about 4 days. And with me, it didn't quite work out that way. You might ask, why not just put me on a donkey like they do the other women and children so we can go faster? Have you ever ridden on a donkey? If you had, you would not ask that of me. I really tried, but it was so uncomfortable and sometimes even painful. I just couldn't do it. I kept asking if I could walk. Please let me walk. And I was slowing us down. The main group of people went on ahead, but we had a few friends and family who were close enough to that they would slow down and wait for us so that we would be safe from the wild animals and the thieves that sometimes roam those roads. I kind of was glad to have the snooty ladies not looking down their noses at me while I was walking and they were riding. But, I felt like we were making it. We were going, right? My mama, she was trying to be helpful. And she said, well, at least walking helps you deliver faster. But that didn't voice my fear of where am I going to be when this baby comes? It was pretty intimidating. But when we finally got to Bethlehem, every inn and every house was filled to capacity. Oh, I felt so bad that it was my fault. But Joseph was so kind. He was so diligent. He kept on knocking. He kept on asking until we found a kind kind soul who was willing to let us use their stable. Well, it was a little scary, and we had a lot of cleaning to do because I was not going to have a baby in a dirty barn. But we finally had a safe, dry, private place for me to have my baby. So we cleaned and we barely got everything done, but we finally did. And when we did, the contractions started. The mama was right, it didn't take very long. And it wasn't very long before everything was done and we were wrapping that precious little baby in swaddling cloths and laying him in the manger. Well, it was so precious to see his perfect little hands and feet and just snuggle with him. My very first time snuggling with my baby, I was so excited. And I started to hear some beautiful music. It was just gorgeous. It sounded like the richest king was having a party in the distance. There were so many voices in perfect harmony. Oh, that brought such joy and peace to my heart. I didn't know if I was dreaming, but the feeling of peace lasted even after the music was gone. And then it was like all my fears and all my worries had been put to rest. And it was a beautiful, beautiful sight. And I thought, I wasn't imagining it because Joseph seemed to be similarly affected, so it must have been real. But as we were there, a group of shepherds just showed up at the stable. They asked to see the baby. I was in no shape to greet them, but Joseph got the baby and he went out to them. He said, "How could you possibly know?" And those shepherds told us the most amazing story. I was so glad I could hear from where I was. I'll never forget that gruff voice saying, "Well, we were just out watching our sheep, the temple sheep, out in the fields, and all of a sudden there was this terrifying angel in front of us. And he was telling us that there was good news. Don't be afraid, I got good news." And it was terrifying, I'll tell you. But he told us that the Messiah and the Savior had been born. And he told us he'd be in Bethlehem and that he would be wrapped in swaddling clothes and laying in the manger. The Messiah in the manger? But before we had time to ask any questions at all, the whole passel of angels filling the sky was there, singing and making beautiful music. And we were so amazed. We just had to come and see for ourselves. When we got here, and it's just like the angel told us. Well, I had a lot to think about. all the good things that God had done for us. Later that night, I asked Joseph, what was it that God did to convince you to marry me? And he told me that he had been given a dream where an angel spoke to him directly and told him the baby was from the Holy Spirit and that he was going to have to name him Jesus because he would save his people from their sins. And then I told Joseph that I had been given a prophecy by the angel Gabriel who had come to me and told me about the baby, that he would inherit his ancestor David's throne and that his kingdom would last forever. We wondered, how is that supposed to happen? Well, but we believed God. We did not doubt God. We didn't really even know what it meant, but we believed God. Well, that first 7 days of Jesus' life, before he got his name officially, we knew from the time he came that he was Jesus, but we don't get to name him until the 8th day. And we just had such a beautiful time with him. He was all ours. We could just hold him and cuddle him and just know that God was caring for us and answering his prophecies were coming true for our people. And it was such a wonderful time. A lot of our family and a lot of the people that came to Bethlehem just to be registered went back home. And we didn't go back with them. Now it's not just because of the scorn we probably would face if we went back to Nazareth. You see, we were just going to have to come back at the end of the month for my mikvah, bath of purification, and to present Jesus at the temple in Jerusalem. And Bethlehem is so close to Jerusalem. We didn't want to have to go way there and all the way back. We just stayed where we were. But luckily, or maybe because the Lord blessed us, a house opened up. And we were able to move from a stable into a house. Yay! That was a good day. But you know, Joseph was able to do some carpentry jobs, and we had a little money, we could pay rent, but we didn't have a lot of money. But we were able to make a few friends, and we were able to take care of ourselves. Even though our family was far away, we were very content there in Bethlehem. But at the end of that month, it was time to go take my mikvah bath and then present Jesus at the temple. And you know, I didn't have much money, but God had made a provision for that. Instead of offering a lamb, we were able to offer 2 turtle doves for the sacrifice of purification. And so we were just thankful. Then, as we were, kind of heading back, this old gentleman came up to us and said, "May I hold the baby?" Well, we let him. He took baby Jesus in his arms, and his whole face lit up with joy. He said, "My name is Simeon." And he told us how he could die a happy man now that he had seen the Lord's salvation. You know, we were starting to realize that God the Father was just as proud of his baby son as we were, and he was telling trustworthy people about him. And it just filled us with confidence that God was really with us and that he was going to take care of us. Well, Simeon said some prophecies over Jesus. He said that Jesus is going to be a light to the Gentiles and glory for the people of Israel. And then he blessed us. It was so nice to be blessed. Then he gave us a really mystifying prophecy. It was so strange. He said, "This child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that many will oppose, so that the thoughts and the hearts of many will be revealed." And then Simeon did the really weird thing. He looked directly in my eyes and he said, "And a sword will pierce your own soul too." Ooh, what did that mean? It sent a shiver down my spine. But then he looked back at the baby and smiled. Oh, that was a little bit strange, but just then, old Anna came up and started praising God. She had overheard everything Simeon had said. Well, Anna, she's a widow. She's been a fixture at the temple from before my parents started bringing me here, maybe even before their parents started bringing them. She served God and worshiped God in the temple, and she knew an awful lot of people who were waiting for the Messiah to be born. She couldn't wait to go out and start telling them all the things that she had heard Simeon say. Well, Joseph and I had a lot to pray about as we walked back to Bethlehem. A lot of decisions to make. You know, we needed to know what God wanted us to do. How are we, us poor people, going to raise a king? Were we supposed to stay in Jerusalem, where the seat of power was? Were we supposed to stay in Bethlehem? Were we supposed to go back to Nazareth? We just didn't know. It was kind of time now. Everything was done. Was it time? Did God want us to have a real marriage? Just so many things to pray about, because we wanted to follow whatever it was that God wanted. Not our will, but God's will. And so we prayed about these things, and when we didn't know, we chose to pray and ask for guidance, but just to be faithful right where we were, because that was what we felt like God wanted us to do. And for the time being, we were going to stay in Bethlehem. Even though it didn't seem like a long-term solution, it was the right thing to do for now. So the time came when both Joseph and I felt like God was giving us the freedom to have a real marriage. And then we were going to trust God for whether he was going to give brothers and sisters to Jesus or not. Well, that first year of living together in Bethlehem was just like a honeymoon. We had a wonderful time watching baby Jesus learn to crawl and trying to struggle up and hold on. And it was just a joy. You know, he did cried a lot when he needed something. But you know what? He also made a lot of happy noises. And it was just a joy to everyone who held him. Well, one night we were sitting up on the roof taking advantage of the cool evening, and we happened to notice a beautiful star in the sky. It was amazing. And so we started watching it every night. And it seemed like every time we looked at it, it got bigger and brighter. And I think even baby Jesus enjoyed watching it with us. Well, one night, as we were watching the star, a whole caravan pulled into Bethlehem. And some of the men from the caravan came straight to our house. They explained that they were learned men from the East who had been studying the writings of the prophet Daniel. And they had been following the star that was the star of the King of the Jews. We shouldn't have been surprised that God, the Father, was still proudly telling everyone about his son Jesus. But these gentlemen actually came and bowed down and worshiped Jesus. Not only that, they brought out gifts that they had brought for him. Gold, because he was royalty. Frankincense, because he would be a healer. And myrrh. Myrrh? Myrrh, because he would suffer and die. You see, we often asked, how was Jesus going to save his people from their sins? What did that mean, right? Well, it turns out he was going to suffer and die on the cross. Just like our lambs used to do when they were given in sacrifice. Well, Jesus lived a perfect life. He never did anything wrong, and I was a witness to that. I didn't understand it until I lived it. Joseph didn't live long enough to see it, but I did. People didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah. Instead, they sent him to the cross. And you know, just like Simeon had said, their hearts were revealed by Jesus. They didn't love God. But God the Father allowed it. Why did he allow it? To pay for the sins of the whole world. Jews and Gentiles alike, the whole world's sins had to be paid for. And that was put on Jesus. That's how he was going to save his people from their sins. But you know, there was other prophecies. The angel told me he was going to inherit the kingdom. It was never going to end. How was that going to happen? I was so devastated when he died. 3 days later, we took myrrh to the tomb to take care of his body properly. And when we got there, it wasn't there. He was alive again. Of course, no one could have done that with Jesus. But he did do it. He came back to life. And I and the disciples, we got to see him. And he told us he was going to heaven to prepare a place for everyone who believed in him. And then he's going to come back someday. He's going to fulfill the rest of those prophecies. And I believe he'll do it. Do you?